Welcome to YMI Talking, a podcast where the guests are so good, you'll wonder why the host is even talking. In each episode, you will hear one of the leaders of the Lehigh Valley's vibrant business hub. They will tell you the keys to their success, the mistakes they've made, and what they have in store for the future. Here is the host of YMI Talking, from YMI Insurance, Jimmy Honachik.
All right, that is me. I am Jimmy Honachik, and I could not be more excited for our guest today. He is someone, let me back up. I started this podcast with the idea of reaching out to the Lehigh Valley community and finding the people who are really making things happen in the community. And you could not find someone who is more emblematic of that than our guest today. This guy has been involved for years. He coached basketball at Lafayette. From there, he was involved in the real estate world. He was the VP of development at LVEDC. He has started what I think has to be the largest networking group in the area. This guy is it, and we are very excited to welcome Pete Reinke onto the show. Pete, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Jimmy. Very kind of you. Very, very nice. I'm humbled by your introduction.
You saying that just sparks my mind. The first time we met, I was immediately put at ease. There is something about your presence, and I don't know if you get this or hear this or understand it, but there's something about your presence where I feel like I've known you forever. How do you do that?
Well, it's funny, Jimmy, because one of the reasons why I have this thing, Friends of Pete, is because everybody is my friend. And I've known you for 60 years. You're my friend. I meet you on the street, and it's like, I literally could have run into you for the first time in a coffee shop 10 minutes ago, and I could tell somebody, expect a call from my friend Jimmy. And sometimes people say, well, that's kind of disingenuous. You don't even know the guy. It's like, I think I do. Like, I'll get to know him better. And so I appreciate you saying that, but that's how I feel with every conversation that I have. I just, I feel at ease. I hope that I make others feel at ease, but I'm glad that you felt that way and feel that way.
So Friends of Pete isn't just a catchy name. It's truly a collection of Friends of Pete, you would say.
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny things as over the years that spread, because I've been doing the happy hours for 15 years, and then the lunch and learns I started this time last year. But, somebody had said to me, what kind of, monumental egomaniac would name a group after him, after himself? And I said, it's not Pete's Friends, it's Friends of Pete. It's like, so everybody kind of knows me or knows each other and makes those connections. So, that's, again, how I try to operate. I don't differentiate against, from anybody, just everybody is a friend of Pete. That's why it continues to grow.
Yeah. And it does. It is. I mean, I don't know if it's officially the largest networking group, but talk to me about its size and scale and how it got to that. It's unbelievable. It truly is its own entity at this point.
Yeah, well, it's kind of you to say, and I always, when I have a long drawn out way of explaining it, it sort of started about 15 years ago, and there's half a dozen people that were friends. We used to get together probably every week to grab a drink after work and just talk. And from there, it morphed into really taking off during my years at LVEDC. When it was almost, Jimmy, it was almost like the after party at big events. You'd come and you'd have an annual meeting. You'd have a really good panel and enjoy the discussion. And then the event would end, and you kind of walk over to the bar, get a beer or a soda, and then it's like, okay, we're closing up in 20 minutes. So it's like, well, let's just, meet at this location afterwards. And over the years, it kind of morphed into, unfortunately, there were some people who would blow off the event just to go to the party. So, but that was really the origins of it was to do it after regular events. And then I'm really big, as you know, on all Lehigh Valley, the entire Lehigh Valley. And so what I've done the last number of years was alternate it between Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, because that was the center of the region. And so if you're in Macungie, it might be hard to get to Easton. If you're in Bangor, it might be hard to get to Allentown. But by doing it 12 months a year, anybody in this region would say, well, I can at least make the four closest to my house. So that's kind of how it first was coming together.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. So in the early days, you said it was 6 people. How does it grow? Like, are you inviting people? How does it get to where it is today?
You kind of invite a friend. One of the changes, Jimmy, that's happened over the years of Friends of Pete is Friends of Pete used to be a real networking group. So again, my role at LVDC was to recruit businesses and to work with the developers and brokers in this area. And so the original days it was true networking. It was engineers and architects, insurance people, CPAs, and corporate people trying to build relationships. So that was, the genesis of it was make deals. And a little bit before COVID, it kind of pivoted from that. And then COVID, helped very little in our world, but in this odd way helped a little bit. That the Friends of Pete idea now is 3 constituent groups. It's young people, which I love helping college age and just out of college age people. It's people who have been displaced from their jobs, say from their early 30s to their late 60s, which, knock on wood, isn't as prevalent in our community right now. And then the third, and maybe my favorite group and how it's changed a little bit, is people who are new to the Lehigh Valley. Not that I grew up here, my grandparents grew up here, but it's like, I moved here last month, I'm here for a job, I'm here for some reason, but I don't know anybody. And that's what I'm maybe most proud of now, is that that's what Friends of Pete functions as, a place to make you feel comfortable and make some connections.
So it's almost less professional and more lifestyle. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because some of my closest friends who used to come together to Friends of Pete all the time don't come anymore because it's less networking. It's helping a nonprofit or helping somebody that's just hey, where do I go to take my kids to a performance? Where do I go for this? And they're like, I don't. In some regards, somebody says, that's not a good use of my time. That's a great use of my time. Again, Jimmy, every time I have the happy hours, I kind of sit either by the door or more often way back in the corner, and it's the new people or who comes and talks to me. You and I want to catch up. We haven't seen each other in a couple of months as buddies. It's like you'll come over and say, hey, Pete, what's up? And talk for a minute, and then we'll go our separate ways. But if you were to say, I just moved here last week, it's like, hey, Jimmy, hang out with me for the next 20 minutes. And as people come by and you're telling me where you're from or what you like to do outside of work, I'm like, well, there's my buddy who also likes to cycle. And there's my buddy who's got 3 kids that might be your kid's age. And then you're feeling just so comfortable in the community that then, you'll help sort of pay it forward, I guess.
Yeah. It does have that feeling. I guess you had the perfect name, right? Where it's a group of friends and you're there to try to help each other out. It's almost less what can you do for me and more what can I do for you?
Yeah, I mean, again, when I was at LVEDC, we had an interim CEO who was a retiree named Bob Weed, who I loved to death, and Bob Weed came into me one day and he said, "There's something wrong with you," and I kind of laughed. I said, "There's a lot wrong with me," but he said, "You like everybody. It's an admirable trait, but is it realistic?" He said, "Your problem is you want everybody to like you, and that's just not the case." And until I was probably 45 years old, I'd hear that you didn't like me, and I'd take you to lunch and meet with you and like, come on, Jimmy, you got to like me. Mm-hmm. And then it got to the point where, no, I like you. If you don't care for me, that's fine. Some people would say that's your loss. I don't necessarily think it's our loss. Maybe we just didn't have synergies. And so I have this thing that group is so big now, Jimmy. The last number of happy hours, we probably get 150 people. It's a lot of people. Yeah. But somebody will call me and they'll say, I don't really care for this person, whether it's business-wise, politically, whatever. So if you're going to invite him or her, I'm not going to come. I said, well, then don't come. But see that lady over there? Yeah, it's like, she doesn't like me. And then like the person will laugh. I'm like, no. I mean, she comes to Friends of Pete every month. I consider her a friend, but she doesn't like me. Mm-hmm. But she would never be asked not to come here anymore because she gets a lot out of it, and my friends like her. So that's, it's not somebody asked me this. I said, it's not a kumbaya thing. I don't think everybody in the world is always going to get along, but it's like, stop being proactively antagonistic against somebody else. If they disagree with you, then, again, it's their loss. They think differently. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have a philosophy that has found its way through Friends of Pete, and it continues to, everyone in there sort of feels that way. And I'm just trying to apply that to sort of the business world. I mean, managing culture, right? Culture is so important. How do you think about culture? How do you try to approach it so that that vision, that mission that you have gets out to those people?
Well, I always say to people, it's like, it sounds simple, but it's like, treat people decently. But, again, with all the people, Jimmy, that I meet, wherever it is, the most important thing to me is your family and your health, right? So you take care of those couple things. But then it's like, well, I also have to earn a living. I need to pay my bills and make some money. And so you find ways to connect. And so to me, I just, everybody's welcome there. You can come once and find a couple clients and leave. But it's more importantly building relationships. And so over the years, I always think when I've helped somebody's spouse or helped somebody's child in some way, they'll never, they never forget that. I had lunch last year with somebody that we were trying to do business with, a really good business out of Philadelphia. And we had some synergies with Univest and this person. And then he mentioned, my son's looking for a job or whatever. And I said, I know a couple of people at that company that he wants to go to. I'll make a connection. And the CEO said, if you help my kid get a job, you can call me 20 years from now. It's like that guy helped my kid get started. And that feels good. Now, I always say the flip side of that is I helped his son get a job and then the job didn't work out. Don't blame me, but don't give me credit. Just at that time, see how it goes.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you touch so many lives in what you do. I guess maybe put on a different hat for a second. Does that come back into whether you're at Univest or somewhere else? Do you find that those relationships, that the selflessness that you've put out there comes back?
I mean, I think so. I told people, Jimmy, I turned 60 a couple months ago, and one of the great things at Univest for me is we have 1,000 people. We've been around for 150 years, and yet it really feels like a family. There's 17 fundamentals, and servant leadership is like the key thing at the organization and all that. And so, yeah, I think it does come around again when you're genuine and helpful. I catch myself sometimes telling people what wonderful human beings, a diverse group of backgrounds and interests and skill sets our Univest team has. And then I have to wait and say, wait a minute, they're really good at what they do. Because sometimes like, well, he's a nice guy, but he doesn't do anything, right? Yeah. So, hey, I want to hang out with you. And then I call you for business. Like, you don't know what you're doing. So you want to emphasize that yes, they do what they're paid to or what they do for a living. But I think when you know how people can be helpful, it's pretty good. So. Yeah.
And I mean, you do obviously so much in the community, but Univest does as well. I mean, what specifically attracted you to Univest? I imagine you had options. How did you end up there?
Yeah, the funny thing was that during COVID, I was looking at making a switch. I'd never been in banking, and a friend of mine had said, you should come to Univest. And I said, I was always on the brokerage side on the real estate game and everything, and being more of a sales guy. And I said, I'm not a finance person. I can't go to a bank. I'm not good at finance. I'm not, overly interested in finance. And they said, no, you're going to be, helping us out as a business development, professional expert helping our team. And, I report, again, one of the reasons I love Univest so much is our structure. I report to a guy named Tony DaCosta, who runs the North region of our consumer banking, our branches, because that's the field I'm in, the department I'm in, Jimmy. And then, our boss, Tony's boss, is Dana Brown, who runs all of consumer banking for Univest. In addition to being a wonderful human being and smart and knowing the banking industry, when I first got hired, Dana and Tony had said to me, it's like, we need a guy to shake hands and kiss babies. And as you've referenced in our conversation now, it's like, humbly, there's nobody better at that than me, I don't think, in the Lehigh Valley. And then they said, by the way, there's COVID, so you can't have physical contact with anybody.
Can't actually kiss the babies.
You know, I mean, you can't actually do it. And so with my Friends of Pete, you know, my good friend Darnell Davis, who runs Friends of Pete with me, we said, well, instead of a monthly happy hour, let's do a weekly Zoom call. And that was when Zoom was first starting. So we had 50, 60 people on the Zoom call every week. And so that started to get out that Pete's at Univest and that we care about helping you. And I got to know some of my colleagues and stuff like that. So that's how that came into. But again, it's an entity that's just about things bigger than yourself. It's family oriented, it's community oriented. So that's the reason that have been so attracted to Univest and always will be.
Yeah, they do a great job. Any event you go to, you know, you'll bump into something Univest there.
Yep.
Talk to me about COVID and Friends of Pete. So you just said you had 50, 60 people on a Zoom call. How did you manage that? How did you navigate something that is such a personal thing to bring it to that virtual world?
Well, again, it was, the whole point again, it was not so much networking as it was connecting with people. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a vivid recollection a couple months into COVID is that Darnell and I were talking and I mean, Jimmy, from colleagues and family members and friends where, the people that have, mental health challenges and all this kind of stuff. And so, who do you know that is going to be especially physically or psychologically vulnerable to COVID? And so early on in one of these calls, we said, okay, today we're going to go around the horn and who's not feeling themselves. And a couple of the first people that spoke up and say, I'm anxious, I'm struggling, were people that were unbelievably outgoing and they had a stable and happy family that they always talked about. They were good at their jobs. And so by them saying, I'm struggling, I'm not doing too well myself, the person who was, living on their own or, had lost their job or was, feeling like, oh man, the world's caving in on me. And it's like, it's still very important that you get that person the resources that they need, but it's like, you're not alone. We're not saying you're not alone just to be condescending. Like, you're not alone. If you need anything, call anybody on this call and we'll support you. So that was why stepping up during COVID was really important. As I said, one of the things about this community is I think that LVDC with Don Cunningham and the Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber with Tony Iannelli and what Becky Bradley at the Planning Commission are doing that's the most important community-wide, high-level things that happen in the Valley. But they were all, waited months to have in-person meetings and stuff like that. Let's get together. And I waited just a couple of months, and then it was like, if you're comfortable coming out, get together. But there's no replacement, in my humble opinion, for human contact. And for a lot of people, it was like, that was something that's important. I told people as COVID was easing a little bit, I think there are probably 150 or 200 people in the Lehigh Valley that said, the first meeting I had in person after COVID was with Pete Reinke. One person was 2 months in, one person was 24 months in. It's like, I'm finally venturing out. Wow. Like, I'll try you.
So you threw out some names there that will certainly ring a bell with listeners. Yep. Don Cunningham, Tony Iannelli. You all of you have been, I would say, instructive in the transformation that we've seen in the Lehigh Valley. Talk to me about that process, right? It's very different than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. Yep. How have you seen that come to fruition?
So it's really interesting that you and I are talking today because I'm part of an organization that used to be a March of Dimes led initiative, Jimmy, that now we have the name. It's the Commercial Industrial Real Estate Committee. And this year in the fall will be our 30th anniversary. And it's been an annual award for the real estate community of awarding a person of the year and a project of the year in real estate. And so we go to Arts Quest, every fall and raise money. And one of the great things about when the March of Dimes, because of COVID, pulled out of the Lehigh Valley, we repositioned that we were going to have our two hospitals benefit, St. Luke's and LVHN.
Yeah.
And, having been a Lafayette guy myself, the Lafayette Lehigh rivalry, the rivalry between the two hospitals and stuff like that, people joke about it. People, think it's more, negative than it is, but it's like, it's two great organizations in one community, but they're both great and they do so much for our community. And yet, when we said, let's do this event to benefit both hospitals, somebody like, we can't even ask them, who do we get first? And instead, we asked them and their senior leadership, and then through the committee that we have with Dallas Pulliam at LVHN and Brett Shawalter at St. Luke's, they came together so that this past year, when we raised $160,000, that's split between the two hospitals, and it's going to the NICU and the Cancer Center and the things that are helping our babies, our young people in this community. The reason I give you that long-winded answer is because we're having our 30th anniversary this year, and we were trying to think, how do we celebrate it? And what we're going to do is kind of a past, present, and future. So when we started that event 30 years ago, and I only feel old when I know that Frank Smith's been on the committee for 30 years, and I've been on it for 29. But as we were talking, it was, and again, to see where we're coming from is there wasn't even a Lehigh Valley 30 years ago, Jimmy. Lehigh Valley's not on the map. LVEDC did not exist. ABE Airport wasn't just call sign, the call letters. It was the ABE Airport. The Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber, we had an Allentown, Eastern, and Bethlehem chamber. Like that was so what I get at and when I push all these things is that so many people in the community do it, but it's the vision and leadership that people like Tony and Don have done to bring those organizations together and grow them. And what they've done a great job, and Don's done at LVDC, is get the CEOs and our largest companies together as one to highlight the area, to bring in other big employers. And so what I view Friends of Pete and my job at Univest and some other things that I'm involved with is we'll take care of the mid-level and the younger people, getting them engaged. We'll let the decision makers make decisions, but when the program kind of filters down, like who's going to execute it, it's helping the young employees and our young people from the community get involved. So that's kind of the history, but why I feel that it's so important. There wouldn't be a Lehigh Valley if it wasn't for efforts of that. And again, young people don't even, what do you mean there wasn't a Lehigh Valley? That's
what I'm sitting here wrestling with. I don't even remember a time when there wasn't a Lehigh Valley.
Yep.
And it feels so cohesive now, like a large metropolis where, yes, we all have our neighborhoods, I guess you would say, but we do feel as though we're sort of one entity.
Yeah.
And so it's really, the collective leadership to bring that change around. It's incredible.
Right. Yep.
And so you go back to the Lafayette days and tell me a little bit about that. I think you coached basketball there, right?
So people always ask me, I've been up here for 33 years. I lived in the same house the first 27 years of my life in Philadelphia. So I always will love Philadelphia and Philadelphia sports teams, but Easton, Lehigh Valley is my home. And so I was the manager of the basketball team as an undergrad. And the reason that I came back here in 1990 was my job was to be assistant basketball coach. So I got to meet young people, be ingrained at the college. It's where I met my wife in the athletic department at Lafayette. That's where I met my Mary. So, it's a really important thing to me. But we used to laugh where, the rivalry with Lafayette and Lehigh, most people think of one day in the fall when we play football. And because I'm a basketball coach and we play each other twice a year, there's 3 days a year that Pete Reinke does not like Lehigh. And every other day of the year, I'll do anything I can support that. And so again, we're so focused, Jimmy, you and I and so many people on what's going on here in the Lehigh Valley, but all of our young people and our family members and people that move on from this area, when you go to the West Coast or overseas or the Midwest, it's like, look up people from Lafayette people, look up Lehigh people or Bucknell people. If you go to Penn State, look up people from Pitt. Like because there's that bond and all that stuff. And so that's the kind of thing of just growing and connecting. But Lafayette allowed me to be involved. I'm very involved with all 11 of our colleges and universities. I think it's really important, again, to help those young people.
Yeah, and besides that, did you find that you hear this all the time, your athletic background helps you in the business world, and sort of what traits do you find are most transferable from that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, and you and I talked about this the other day. It's like the top quality to get to me was always to be a hustler. And people always don't use profanity or whatever, but it's like show up and give a crap. It's basically the most important philosophy I say to a young person. It's like just show up there, pay attention, and be involved. And so things that happen in this community or organizations that happen, it's like, just show up. I love it, Jimmy, when somebody wants to go, right? And then I'm okay if somebody's not sure that they want to go, but I'll tag along with you. But the older I get, something that I think I specialize in is the person who doesn't want to go, and I'll like badger them to show up. And then do me a favor, show up for 30 minutes or an hour, and then I'll never bother you again. And 90% of the time, the person who's kicking and screaming goes, well, you didn't tell me that lady was going to be here. You didn't tell me that company was going to be here. And it's like, and then it morphs into a relationship that people would not have maybe ever made if they weren't forced into a situation where they're uncomfortable. And again, everybody I talk to, I'll sit there and say, just approach me anytime, anywhere I am. And then somebody says, I'm younger. I'm a woman. I'm a person of color. I'm, somebody that doesn't speak English. How do I do that? And so I try to practice what I preach. So I'll walk over to a bunch of women and be like, "Hi, ladies," and they're like, "Who's this clown?" And then, and they're like, "Well, hey, I'm Pete Reinke. I'm with Univest. I have this networking group. I care about this community." And then, and if they kind of roll their eyes, then I'll walk away. But there's usually, like, "Oh, Univest, I know somebody there. Oh, you're the Pete that's friends with this person." And then, so it's not just saying come to me and be welcome. It's like there's that idea of having to be proactively engaging with somebody.
You're 100% right. I mean, I think there's a small window before I go into any networking event where I'm like, do I really want to do this? Like, I don't know if I'm going to know anyone. But then once you're there, you're right. There's all these connections that you didn't know you're going to have, and you're talking and you're meeting these people. It's electric.
It's nice of you to say that. I laugh because I say in some ways I'm like an HR nightmare because I'm friendly, but I'll ask you anything. And again, I'll ask you so many questions that, you're not done answering my first question. I'm asking you a fifth question. And it's not because I'm dismissive or I don't value you. I'm trying to find
don't slow down,
common ground. What's that?
I said, you don't slow down. You do. You go fast and you go hard and you get to the core of people, I think.
As I said, it's what works for me because it's like you're trying to find somebody where if somebody comes to our community as a newcomer and doesn't want to be here, then that's fine. I'll miss them, but it's like what I live for is that somebody came here and said I was mistreated or somebody was not open to me. That's something that I kind of try to stand up for. It's like, you can dismiss somebody, but don't be rude, don't be nasty, don't bully anybody. Just if you say you're going to help. If you say you'll answer a question, answer it. If you're too busy or important to, spend time, that's fine. Pass it on to somebody that has that time. And so I just think that's, I see more and more people doing that. And again, it's why the consistency of, my friends at Pete, it's why 1 million cups that I think is the best thing going in the Lehigh Valley, which is every Wednesday at 9 at the community college helping entrepreneurs. It's like, just show up at that, make some connections, offer up your help, and then live your life, but we know this is an awesome community. Jimmy, I always talk when you ask me about basketball, I'm a huge, sports fan. Everybody that knows me, knows that. And I say with what's happened with the, Iron Pigs and the Phantoms all the time is that I actually follow, European soccer. And back into my LVDC days, I used to say this, where they have this thing where the top the worst teams in the professional leagues get kicked to the minor leagues. Yep. And the best teams in the top, minor league get put into the professional league. And what I would argue and what I believe to my core about the Lehigh Valley is like we're that's the smallest community that was playing in the major leagues. And at first they're like, oh, little Lehigh Valley, the big underdog. It's like we're not an underdog. Like we go up against New York or LA or Chicago. It's like we expect to win, and that's a community vibe that I think is extraordinarily important and is true throughout most of this community.
So this is the part of the show that I hate the most because I could do this literally all day. It is awesome talking to you and knowing all the things that you do and hearing about them. But I do have to wrap it up at some point. So I have two things that I want to do. I want to first give you an opportunity, and I think I already know the answer. If you had to sum up the Pete philosophy in one term, I heard show up, offer your help, and live your life, which I thought was like the most Pete thing that I could. But if you had to sum up the Pete philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
I mean, it's funny. I think you said it. It's just like, just show up, do what you say you're going to do. The other thing is be willing to take criticism. That's another thing that people get sensitive about. It's like, I want to help. If you don't want my help or my help's not good, that's cool. Yeah.
No, that's great. All right. So then this show has been brought to you. Our sponsor is Notch Modern Kitchen and Bar. I love Notch, and they do this really cool thing where they make a custom cocktail. Basically, you tell them what kind of alcohol you want and what kind of mood you're in, and they make it for you. And it's awesome. And so I like to do this. I like to kick it up a notch, and that's what we're going to do here. So you are hosting a happy hour. It's Friends of Pete. And let's say it's your 60th birthday. What is the drink of choice for Pete at this event? You're going there. What can you not wait to grab and have?
It has to be a Tanqueray and tonic, but to your point, it's always some of the local gins. I would always be good with that. So
yeah,
Tanqueray and tonic is the go-to
some social
drink.
Still gin or something along those lines.
Yep, exactly. That's a spot that I like.
Yeah. We're lucky. We can't dive into it, but we're lucky to have so many distilleries and breweries in this area. There's just so much to do.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're fantastic.
Well, all right, Pete.
Breweries, wineries, and distilleries are great in this community.
It really is. We are very lucky. We're playing in the majors. So I cannot say thank you enough. It has been great having you on here, learning your philosophy, and just spending some time with you. Thank you very much, Pete, for coming on the show.
Thanks, Jimmy. See you soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the YMI Talking podcast. If you enjoyed this and want to hear more content from amazing personalities in the Valley, please subscribe, leave a rating, and drop us a quick review.